I'm Louisa Krug. I'm going to introduce our first. So our first session today is titled Rebuilding Black Wall Street, which will inform participants about the history and legacy of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. This session is sponsored by TSET. Our speaker is Phil Armstrong, who is currently serving as the project director for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Commission.
It's great to be with you all. Thank you, Louisa, for inviting me and letting me know that this would be a part of the discussions today. And so it's always an honor to be able to share this information and to talk about this history and the work that has been done long before Phil Armstrong and even the Centennial Commission. I'd like to give reference. You see on your screen there, Greenwood Rising, the legacy of Black Wall Street. I'm the project director of the Centennial Commission. Prior to me being the project director, so a little background on me, I'm an Ohio native. And lived here now. This will be my 24th year of living in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The interesting point is that I like to bring out that emphasizes the lack of the educational awareness of this history, its vibrancy, and even in its horrific tragedy with the massacre, is the fact that I was attending an historically Black college and university, an HBCU called Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio. And in 1991, I was a sophomore, and our college professor, Dr. Edwin Clay, spent an entire semester teaching us and talking about the Oklahoma Territory and the vibrancy of these all Black communities around the turn of the century. And we studied and watched videos and documentaries and films and of these incredible towns, and then the incredible vibrancy that was the talk of the nation at the time, and what was going on in the Oklahoma Territory. By 1883, over 30 all Black towns, Boley, Oklahoma, which even had its own Black-owned bank, and Langston, of course, where Langston University comes from. But all of this was happening, and we learned about it. And then we learned about Greenwood and the quote unquote Black Wall Street of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And also, of course, we learned about the massacre, and it was referred to as the race riot back then. I give all that reference to say I was in Ohio and was completely immersed in this history. So imagine how shocking it was to move here in 1997 and to find out that I knew more about the history of this state as it relates to Black Americans than pretty much most everybody who was born here and even went to school here. Fast forward to now, the last 5 or 6 years prior to doing this, I was actually a volunteer and a board member of the Greenwood Cultural Center, and actually was their board chair for about 1.5 years before taking on this position. So I come with a lot of history, and it's pretty surreal to be trusted, I should say, and trusted by the community to teach and to prepare and basically help us all coalesce around this history in a way that healing can happen on a mass-wide level, but more so enlightenment and education to the world of what's going on. Also want to let you know, this is not, the Centennial Commission does not take the place of the actual state-appointed commission that was set 1997 to 2001, the Oklahoma State Commission to study the Tulsa race riot of 1921. He was the leader or the director of that was Bob Blackburn, who ran the Oklahoma Historical Society for almost 40 years, and two pivotal leaders from our community, Senator Maxine Horner, whom we still, as a community, mourn her loss. She was just a sojourner for this history, and also Representative Don Ross and their leadership. Out of that report is what we use today. It's a 200-page report that's still held with the Oklahoma Historical Society, and it's free for download. And I encourage people to go look at it. And people have forgotten about that. A state commission taxpayer-funded report, 5 years research. And that's where we got the actual number of deaths, between 100 and 300. The fact that there are mass graves and the narratives of those, the survivor accounts and the survivors and their recordings and their witness accounts that was collected by Eddie Faye Gates. Out of that full report, there were 5 specific recommendations for reparations that were offered to the state that found the Oklahoma Guard, Oklahoma, the city of Tulsa, and Tulsa Police Department to be complicit in those actions from May 31st to June 1st. and they offered 5 specific recommendations for reparations. And here we are 20 years later. That report was turned in 2001, and not one of those policies and those recommendations have ever been enacted upon. And so the Centennial Commission was not to repeat that work, but to see what are ways that we can heighten this, that we can bring this to a worldwide, nationwide level, that it can't be swept under the rug anymore, that no one can ever say again that they will grow up in Oklahoma and not know this information. So we have done an incredible amount of work in the last 5 years. Our founder and chair, Senator Kevin Matthews, and our community consensus of an organization of people coming together, which we call the Centennial Commission. And of course, we're at the threshold, and these projects are now coming to full fruition that we've been talking about. And the pinnacle, I'll start going through the slides here, the pinnacle of all those events and all those, I should say, planning comes to Greenwood Rising. As you know, it's currently under construction, an 11,000 square foot facility that will be the Black Wall Street History Center, Greenwood Rising. The designers, Shelter Schaefer Architects, and the interior exhibits designed by local projects. They're based out of New York City. They are an expert design firm, and they were the ones that sat with community members, from elected officials to members of the commission to members of that were descendants directly tied to this, to those who were just mom and pop. And they spent 3 different trips coming to Tulsa and doing a listening tour, if you will, and actually took down notes and spent time with people, asking them, if you were to have a history center to tell this story, what are the stories that need to be told? What are the things that people need to hear? What are things that people need to learn and see besides the massacre? And so a lot of the information and a lot of the exhibits are directly guided from the fact that these ideas came from the community, and we're just so extremely proud of that. The exhibits that you'll see on front of your screen, the things that will be highlighted, the intro theater will be a place to gather and to see a video that will, I'm really proud about the African Americans locally that we were able to contract with and hire on this project. A local African American visionary and creative person named Trey Thaxton. He spent the last 3 months putting together a video, an incredible film that people will watch for about 7 to 8 minutes or 10 minutes or so, that will visually prepare for you for about what you're going to see. That will take you then into the Greenwood spirit, where you'll learn about Oklahoma. How did Black people even get to Oklahoma in the first place? You'll learn about the true stories of the Trails of Tears and how the Native Americans brought their African slaves with them, that the Native Americans owned slaves and brought them to Oklahoma when they made that journey, the Trail of Tears. How Black Americans were able to acquire land, and then when you own land, the power that came from that, the wealth that came from that, and then the discovery of oil and gas so that they can be enriched just like white oil barons back at that time. You'll learn that story, and that what leads up to the creation of a Greenwood or Black Wall Street with O.W. Gurley and all the pioneers, that incredible rich history of what happened in this community, in this insular, incredible African-American community that just sprang forth and literally, quite literally, was the talk of the nation. Make your way to Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Territory, if you are a Black person in America, so that you can enjoy freedom, you can enjoy what the phrasing would have been, what we can find ourselves being equal to the white man, because we can own our businesses, own our property, pursue our destinies without persecution. It became a respite, a literal paradise. And it's incredible that so many people growing up in Oklahoma never have read that, never have that history. In fact, you'll find out and you'll see the research here. Many people are going to be surprised when they see things about a gentleman by the name of Edwin P. McCabe, E.P. McCabe. In 1883, there were so many Black prospering towns that were operating at such a high level. He was one that would come into Oklahoma and go to these Black towns, and he encouraged Black citizens to run for public office, to be a part of policy making. There were so many Black operating towns doing so well that they actually started having discussions with the United States government on whether Oklahoma should just be declared an all Black state. That's one of those things that just makes your eyebrows pop up and you think, why haven't I ever been taught that? But that's some of the information that people are going to come in here and realize, that the rich history here in Oklahoma that's been hidden for so many years. But that's just one component, but you'll get that spirit and you'll understand the power that Greenwood was for Black citizens back at that time. We're going to celebrate the life of Greenwood by the portrayal of a 1920s style barbershop, and the emphasis that Black barbershops and the Black church, these community safe spaces, and how they've always been these places in Black communities around the country and even today. And so we'll celebrate that with a Black barbershop style space with these holograms that will be talking to you and telling you about the history of Greenwood and experiencing that with you. And even you'll be able to sit in the barber chair, and the hologram that you're looking at in the mirror will act as if it's cutting your hair and talking to you about Greenwood. We're really excited about this. We're going to actually highlight a local family, the Eaton family, who actually had a barbershop in North Tulsa. And in the 1940s, 1960s, it actually was the birthplace of the Tulsa Civil Rights Movement. So there's a lot of tie-in to community with some of the things that we're going to be actually showcasing in there. We go through the next two exhibits that talk about the history of what was happening in America and in Tulsa that was heightening the racial animosity in the territory that led to a 1921 Tulsa race massacre. And you'll see there, it's called the arc of oppression, or the systems of anti-Blackness, things that were taking place that was building this racial jealousy and animosity towards Black citizens in, again, not just Oklahoma, but around the United States. Just to give you some examples, 1907, Oklahoma becomes a state. Its first law that it enacts is law Jim Crow. 1911, the very familiar in many history books around the country, the horrific nature of lynchings, and it will have in a showcase and talk about the lynching of Laura Nelson and her teenage son in Okemah, Oklahoma, as they're shown dangling, lynched and hung from the Okemah Bridge there in Okemah, Oklahoma in 1911. 1916, when Tulsa, the ordinance, they made a law in 1916 that Black citizens and white citizens, it's illegal for them to even live in the same neighborhood. That was 1916. Then we moved to 1919 and talk about the Red Summer of 1919, where there were just these violent acts against communities of color all around the country, period from the summer to the winter of 1919, about 15 acts of just going in and destroying some communities of color. So we paint that picture so people understand 1921 was not just this one day something happened. There were things that were building over time, a system of anti-Blackness, and Tulsa, Greenwood being the pinnacle of this jealousy, of this animosity, because of the wealth and the richness and the vibrancy of Greenwood. And all it needed was, as Hannibal Johnson, our expert historian, no one on the planet of Earth knows more about Greenwood than the 10 books that he's written and the 30 years of research that he has done. He's actually the curator for the museum. We'll talk about how that striking of a match was the article in the Tulsa World on May 30th, 1921, that said, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator." And that was the incident that caused this reaction for a white mob to form. He gets arrested, he being Dick Rowland, 19-year-old, who was accused of attacking a white girl on an elevator, the white girl being Sarah Page, 17-year-old. And that false narrative, that characterization of him attacking this young girl, which was found to be false later on as she recanted her story, but the damage was done. That was the striking event that caused a conflict to take place downtown in front of the courthouse. And at 10:30 p.m., the first shots were fired on May 31st. The Black citizens that were downtown trying to protect Dick Rowland retreat to Greenwood over the next hour and a half, as the first commission report provides, that over the next hour and a half, the Tulsa Police Department at that time deputized many of the members of the white mob that were there. They're given guns, they're given ammunition. Some of them break into pawn shops and stores and steal guns and get ammunition. And about 1:30 in the morning, this mob makes its way into Greenwood at the corner of Elgin and Archer, and they begin 16 to 18 hours of destruction, carnage, shooting, killing, burning, looting, and literally destroyed an entire community. We don't leave that there. In fact, one of the things that the community said over and over as we would come back forth and have community meetings about what we were going to display, many of the responses were, don't just focus on the massacre. Let people know that they rebuilt their community. And that's what takes us into Changing Fortunes, to talk about how Greenwood was able to bounce back. Within 5 years, 1926, 80 to 90% of Greenwood is rebuilt. And it kept rebuilding itself. Actually, by the 1940s, is really the peak of the economic activity. It was actually almost double the size. Many people think that time stood still in 1921. Very few people realize that this community rebuilt itself without any remuneration or assistance from the government, the city of Tulsa, or Oklahoma, or the National Guard, again, who were all found to be complicit, without the ability to claim files and receive their insurance filings from their insurance companies for life insurance, business insurance. They were all denied because it was labeled a riot, a race riot. In fact, they refer to it as a Negro uprising. The Tulsa Tribune, in the days and weeks afterwards, blamed the Black residents for what happened. If they had just stayed where they were, if they hadn't come downtown, it's their fault. And they would send postcards all around the country to show the country and give this false narrative that this uprising you're reading about, it's their fault. They actually have postcards that went out that said, running the Negro out of Tulsa. We want to talk about that history, that in spite of all that animosity and all of that false reporting and the heightened level of the Ku Klux Klan and Jim Crow and segregation, that they still said, we shall not be moved. This is our land. This is what we own, and we're going to rebuild it. Again, by 1943, that's where you see the peak of economic activity. Over 200 registered Black businesses, over 1,200 registered Black-owned homes, over 3 major hospitals, over 7 major grocery stores, over 30 restaurants. All that peaks in the 1940s. And it's an amazing, amazing story of the indomitable spirit of resilience. And we tell that story. All of that leads into the decline of what happened. What was the second destruction? An urban renewal, or what African Americans refer to as urban removal, of the building of the I-244 that split right through the heart of the community and literally destroys Greenwood again by placing a highway, an urban renewal program, and all the homes, all the businesses that were removed because of eminent domain. And that began this incredible downward spiral in the economy of Greenwood, on top of integration and the fact that many Black citizens just began to leave and move away from Oklahoma was the final blow. But that flame may have flickered, but the flame of Greenwood never went out. And we know that now we see this resurgence coming back for Greenwood. And so the next space, the dialogue space and commitment space, is using this information to educate, to enlighten, to bring people to the awareness that you can come into a space here called the Journey to Reconciliation. And it's an amphitheater style space room equipped with classroom type material and equipment, so that we can have a programmatic space to have discussions about race, what still keeps us divided. Talk about biases, talk about prejudices, talk about the role that white supremacy has had in some of these violent acts, and that unfortunately, we still have remnants in pockets of our country and neighborhoods where that racist mindset still exists. And how do we combat that? How do we sit down and talk about these things that need to be addressed in a safe space to bring Black, white, young, old, liberal, conservative together to talk about where do we go from here? And that's what Greenwood Rise is going to do. And you can make a commitment. What I will do that, or what you can personally do, and leave a commitment behind on things that you will adopt or things that you want to do to try to impact race relations going forward. So that's really the work of Greenwood Rising, bringing communities together with this history. You can see here some construction photos. We are very, very, very close, getting prepared to debut this building and dedicate it as one of the commemorative events. This building is all for the dedication and remembering of the victims from this massacre, the descendants and family descendants, the survivors, to honor their history and to honor this incredible community for the world to come here and see. Not only that, we have the Pathway to Hope. Pathway to Hope is an outdoor walking path that we are constructing. I should say the Oklahoma Department of Transportation partnered with us to construct. And you can see there it stretches from Greenwood over to Elgin. It will be a beautifully landscaped walking path with trees and with landscaping and with seating benches, park benches to sit and reflect. And on the new Oklahoma Department of Transportation retainer wall, there will be continual images of African-American art to display that we received from some of those who submitted art projects for the Greenwood Arts program that Jerica Wortham has been leading along with Rick Lowe and that Greenwood Arts Project program. So you'll see displays of African-American art, some of the icons of Greenwood, and read about their history. So it's an outdoor reflective space, and more so, it's seen as a symbol of rejoining the district that was bifurcated by the I-244. And I like to show this image because everything you see here, when you see where this highway went through, when you see where the ballpark is, all of this are Black neighborhoods, homes, businesses. Imagine just in this portion, and it goes much further, all the way to Pine Street, North Pine, just how many people were impacted by what happened when this highway came through and destroyed Greenwood a second time. So here's some updated images. The pathway is just about complete, and we'll be debuting this again as one of the centennial events, May the 28th, which is a Friday at 5:21 p.m. along with the John Hope Franklin Symposium and their annual prayer walk. We will ribbon cut and take the initial walk down that pathway as citizens together. There's just some of the events that we have been already experiencing, this being a commemorative year and not just a one and done, but throughout the year, having various events that on a high scale and high level bring attention and awareness to this history in many different ways. And this is available, and the full calendar is available on our website at tulsa2021.org. If you haven't heard this morning, our Remember and Rise commemorative program to honor the victims, the descendants, the survivors, and this rich history, a nationally televised event to commemorate this. And we announced this morning that our special featured guest will be recording artist John Legend, who will be speaking and then singing and performing a small concert after the program. We open up the gates. It will be held at the Driller Stadium. We open up gates to start seating at 12, and from 12 to 4 will be a showcase of some of the incredible local African-American talent that we have all come to know and hear of. Some of you all know some of these artists from some of the hip hop artists with Steph Simon and Chris Davis, who have promoted, and Dr. Stevie Johnson and the work that Fire in Little Africa has done. We'll have some artists, we'll have some musicians, we'll have singers, we'll have spoken word individuals to showcase locally the talent that we have here before we get into the program that starts at 4. We'll be having more announcements of some of the other celebrities that will be joining us and coming to commemorate, not celebrate, but commemorate this history with us. And you can see there's several other things that are taking place that week. And again, you can find this on our website at tulsa2021.org. It has been an incredible collaborative experience, being able to highlight this history, and rising tide lifts all ships. We want people to come here and experience this in Greenwood Rising, and then be able to give them a pamphlet, a brochure. What do you do now? Now you go walk this history. Go and see the historic Greenwood Chamber buildings. Go just north of there and see historic Vernon AME Church and walk through that sanctuary and see the remaining structure of the brick walls that still remain from 1921. Go across the street and see the Black Wall Street mural on the wall, and go see the 1921 Tulsa Race Riot Memorial there that has the financial destruction and all the businesses that were destroyed. Go inside Greenwood Cultural Center and see the Survivors Gallery, and go see the Mabel B. Little House. Walk just north of there and see the E.W. Woods Booker T. Washington Memorial. Take a short walk west of there and go see the history of Standpipe Hill and the battle that took place there. walk south and go to the Mount Zion Baptist Church, one of the first structures that were destroyed in 1921, and read about their history, and then make your way to John Hope Franklin Park and experience that history that's there. It can be an incredible experience for people to come here and be immersed, not just in the massacre, but immersed in this incredible, incredible community that once was, and I say still can be again. So we're excited for the world to be here. For many, many, many thousands of people are already making the pilgrimage. And I call it a pilgrimage because that's what people are telling us when they email us and say, where can I get a hotel room? My family is coming. We're making our pilgrimage back to Tulsa to commemorate with you. So it's going to be an incredible time. All eyes on Tulsa. And this is in conjunction also with Legacy Fest. Legacy Fest, the Black Wall Street Legacy Fest, many organizations around the city working together so that there can be many, many forms of commemorating, with concerts, with music, with arts, with vendors. The Tiffany Crutcher Foundation, the Terrence Crutcher Foundation, led by Tiffany Crutcher, the Greenwood Cultural Center, John Hope Franklin Center, Vernon AME Church. Those are just a few that are going to be a part of many different things going on, beginning with the John Hope Franklin Symposium on Wednesday, May 26th, going through that weekend, the debut and the presentation of Stevie Johnson's Fire in Little Africa project, the hip hop project that Motown is going to release. Just so many things. There will be stages everywhere through out Greenwood for people to come, black, white, red, brown, young, old, to come and commemorate and honor, remember, but to go away changed and enlightened on this history. So it's just been an incredible time of planning, and we're looking forward to that. And for the years to come, what happens after 2021? Economic empowerment, the revitalization of Black-owned homes and businesses that we believe will go forward after the north of I-244 and reclaim these areas that used to be saturated with Black homes and businesses, and see that area come back again. That's a much longer process, of course, the next 3, 5, 10 years of just a continual revitalization, specifically for descendants and those who are African-American that want to see this resurgence of this area come, and all parts of our community, white citizens and bankers and those in business who have contacted us and said, when that happens, I want to be a part of it. I want to put money into that fund, and we want to make sure reparations finally comes through for the survivors and descendants. According to the 1997-2001 report, the world coming in and demanding finally all together, now that they know this history and now they see this history, saying, let's go back to that report and let's make sure that these people finally receive their justice, not just in these communal reparations, but monetary reparations as well. And we believe that this will tell the story so that all can join in and help us bring that to a reality. I know it's 9:39. I think I had till 9:45. So I want to leave this time open to see if there's any questions, any statements, or Louisa, you can let me know what I need to do from here in my remaining amount of time.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. We do actually have one question. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I think earlier we said you could also use the chat. We actually turned the chat off just so everything was in one place. So please just use the Q&A feature. So our first question is from Paula. She asks, will there be a connection between the Pathway to Hope and the Greenwood Cultural Center?
Okay, let me put that back on the screen again so I can describe it. So I believe if you can see this screen here, let me enlarge it. There we go. So it actually connects Greenwood Avenue to Elgin Avenue. And so you can walk across here and connect the district here. But here's where Greenwood Rising will be built on this corner. Here's the Greenwood Chamber buildings. And then you can either go north of there and experience Vernon AME Church, Greenwood Cultural Center. Then you can walk across the parking lot and come down. I know it's not pictured here, but just above Mount Zion, you can come down south and get to the John Hope Franklin Park and then walk back across and bring back to your destination or your beginning point. But it connects the entire area, and not specifically Greenwood Culture Center or a Pacific spot, but it makes it so that you can walk the district and get to all these other places and spend the day. Our thing would be spend the day in Greenwood, learning the history and walking this history. So I hope that answered that question.
Thank you so much. We have another question from Rebecca, who first said amazing, so just wanted to point that out. And then said, can you talk about any vision you might have for highway or freeway remediation?
Excellent question. So I do know probably for the last 6 months, a lot of these things that, for example, it took us 5 years to get here. And the great thing is that there are so many vibrant people and passionate people that want to be a part of the process. But, when you're 2 months away from, these things being debuted, and people come along and say, hey, I've got an idea for this, I've got an idea for that. And you're like, that's great. But we started planning things like 3 years ago to get to this point and all that it takes. So I say that to say, for the last 6 months, there has been conversation between certain individuals that deal with the highway and Department of Transportation, starting to make those discussions on the federal level, now that we have kind of an administration that's kind of open to things like environmental justice. So without giving, specific details, I will say that there is thoughts of what it would take. It's like the basic planning of how much money would we have to raise with the federal government involved, with the state government involved, if we were to remediate this area and reclaim the area, relocating I-244, or even in some instances, what would it take to bury it, make a tunnel that goes underneath and reclaim the land? I do know that those conversations are taking place, but those are 5, 10, 15-year type of projects with multiple $100 million. But just to be at this point where it is actually conversations taking place to see what it would take to do that before it comes before the public in a voting manner, because you'll have to have taxpayer dollars to be involved in that. It's just incredible that we're actually at a point where people are trying to see what's the reality of that happening.
And actually, just a preview, there's a session after lunch with Ben Crowther from the Congress for New Urbanism, and he's going to talk about freeway removal and how that's worked in other cities. So stick around for that session. So Isaac asks, just really quickly, do we need tickets to attend any of the commemoration events, centennial commemoration?
So yes, we got specifically for Remember and Rise, May 31st at Driller Stadium, and then Economic Empowerment Day for June 1. You've got to have tickets. We have sponsorship. We raised enough sponsorship beyond our capital campaign and what we did. We had to actually raise additional sponsorship for these events. But we have enough sponsorship that all these events are free, but you do have to get a ticket. Because if we only have so many people in there. But tickets for Remember and Rise will be available for the public to be able to access next Friday, May 21st, for the general public. We have been reaching out and holding tickets specifically for the North Tulsa community. I think you all can understand that, we wanted to make sure survivors, descendants, their families, North Tulsa citizens, this history is for them. And so we have done incredible work in making sure we reach out to the community that this is really for, to make sure that they are seated there. And then we'll have about 2,000, maybe 3,000 tickets left that will just become for the general public. So look for that Friday, May 21st. Same thing for Economic Empowerment Day. They've already had registration and tickets going for quite a while, but if you go to our website, click on EED or Economic Empowerment Day, get you a ticket. We have space for about 500 at the Cox Business Convention Center. But we'll have a virtual audience of about 2,000 prepared, and you can get a ticket for either the virtual and watch on that whole day and all those events, all those panelists and the speaking, or actually get a ticket to attend in person.
And just to confirm, is your website, is it tulsa1921.org? Is that
Tulsa 2021.
Okay, 2021.org.
Just remember Tulsa and the year, tulsa2021.org.
Okay, and we can probably try to send information like this to presenters or to attendees throughout the day. So I think we just have time for one more question. Gary asks, will cycling be incorporated into the historic district?
So that's already been incorporated in. If you drive down, what is it? It used to be Cincinnati, Martin Luther King Drive. If you go down the John Hope Franklin Parkway, if you go down Peoria, those areas have already been striped for cyclists and biking. So that was a city plan. In fact, I believe our city councilors were involved in that plan from 2 years ago, and now you can see the streets lined with that now. In fact, even in Deep Greenwood, along Archer and along Elgin, you can see those cycling areas on the side of the streets now.
Well, thank you so much for your time. There were also a couple shout outs in the Q&A just about how interesting this was and how excited people are to see what will to experience the things you talked about with Greenwood Rising. So again, thank you so much for your time. I'll pass it over to Jane now to introduce Robin.